The 63rd floor of Mercer Tower was a place where ambition lived and breathed like a living thing, where the air smelled of fresh-cut flowers arranged by invisible hands every morning, and the carpet was so thick it swallowed the sound of footsteps whole. People moved through those hallways the way prey animals move through dangerous terrain, quietly, carefully, without making themselves known. Everyone who worked for Damien Mercer had learned, sometimes painfully, that the space around him was sacred, and you did not enter it uninvited. Damien Mercer was 33 years old, and by every measurable standard the world recognized, he had already won. He had taken a crumbling tech startup inherited from a father who died too young and turned it into a $16 billion empire in less than a decade. His name appeared on magazine covers with words like visionary and ruthless printed beneath his photograph in clean, serif type, as though both words were equally complimentary, as though he had earned them both with equal pride. He wore custom suits the color of storm clouds. He had a jaw cut from something harder than ordinary bone, and eyes the particular shade of gray-green that made people feel, when he looked at them directly, that he was seeing straight through to whatever they were hiding. He was not unkind the way cruel people are unkind, with intention and pleasure. He was unkind the way glaciers are unkind, cold, immovable, entirely indifferent to the small things that break against them. His assistant, Marcus, a brilliant 26-year-old who had graduated top of his class from Wharton, had been reduced to a trembling, stammering version of himself in Damien's presence within his first 2 weeks on the job. Marcus now communicated primarily through email even when they were in the same room, which Damien preferred because it meant less noise. The executive floor operated under what the staff privately called the Three Commandments: don't speak unless spoken to, don't linger, and above all else, do not bring anything emotional into the workspace. Damien Mercer had no patience for emotion. He viewed it the way engineers view structural weakness, as a flaw to be eliminated before it caused catastrophic failure. Somewhere along the way, in the decade of grinding work and loss and sacrifice that had built his empire floor by floor, he had decided that feeling things too deeply was simply inefficient. His personal penthouse took up the entire top floor of the building, a vast, beautiful, sterile space that looked more like an art installation than a home. Every surface was precise. Every corner held intentional negative space. There were no photographs on the walls, no accumulated clutter of a life lived with other people, no evidence that anyone had ever sat on the couch long enough to leave an impression. People who saw it for the first time almost always went quiet in a particular way, not the quiet of admiration but the quiet of something that felt, though they could never quite name it, like sadness. The cleaning staff rotated through on a strict schedule, always during hours when Damien was at the office, always with precise instructions about what could be touched and what could not. His housekeeper agency was among the most expensive in New York, known for its discretion and its absolute reliability. Staff signed non-disclosure agreements. They wore uniforms. They were invisible by design, and that was exactly how Damien wanted it. It was the second Tuesday of March when the agency called Marcus with what it described, apologetically, as a temporary scheduling conflict. The regular crew assigned to the penthouse had been double-booked due to a clerical error. A replacement had been arranged. Her name was Sophia Reyes, and she came with the agency's highest recommendation: experienced, thorough, professional. She would arrive Wednesday morning, between 7 and 9, while Damien was expected to be at a board meeting across town. What the agency did not mention, because Sophia had not fully disclosed it, was that her usual childcare arrangement had fallen through the night before. Her neighbor, who watched her daughter Lily on cleaning days, had come down with a sudden fever. Sophia had called every name in her contact list. She had rearranged the problem 17 different ways in her mind and found no solution that did not involve losing the job. She could not lose the job. So she did the only thing she could do. She brought Lily with her. Lily was 3 years old and roughly the size of a determined garden gnome. She had her mother's dark curly hair, her late father's wide brown eyes, and an absolutely unshakable conviction that the world was a fundamentally interesting place filled with things worth examining. She did not yet know how to be quiet in the way adults know how to be quiet, strategically, fearfully, as a form of self-protection. She was quiet only when she was sleeping or so deeply absorbed in something that the rest of existence had temporarily ceased to matter. Sophia carried her daughter on one hip and her cleaning caddy in the other hand as she stepped off the private elevator and into the penthouse for the first time. She stood in the entryway for a moment, taking in the scale of the space, the high ceilings, the enormous windows flooding the room with cold morning light. Lily turned her head slowly, in the way of small children cataloging new environments, her eyes traveling across the room with the calm, methodical attention of a scientist. "Big," Lily said simply, with the gravity of a formal pronouncement. "Yes, baby," Sophia whispered, already dreading the math of this morning. "Very big. And we need to be very, very quiet, okay? This is a very important man's home." Lily considered this information with the same careful seriousness she applied to most things. Then she nodded, with great dignity, as though she had just agreed to terms she found reasonable. Sophia went to work. She had become good at this, the focused, efficient motion of someone who has learned to accomplish difficult things under impossible conditions. She had been cleaning other people's beautiful homes for 4 years, since Lily's father, Marco, had died in a construction accident 6 months before their daughter was born. She had been 24 years old, 7 months pregnant, and entirely alone in a city that did not slow down for grief. She had pulled herself to standing by sheer force of the kind of love that has nowhere to go except forward, the love of a mother for a child not yet born, a life not yet started, a future she refused to let collapse. She had built something careful and fragile and real. She had a small apartment in Queens, a co-op preschool that Lily adored, 3 reliable clients, and this agency that paid well enough to keep the lights on. It was not the life she had once imagined for herself, but it was hers, and she protected it fiercely. What she could not have known, as she began moving through the silent, beautiful rooms of Damien Mercer's penthouse, was that this morning, this ordinary, stressful, impossible Wednesday morning, was the morning that everything was about to change. For both of them, the board meeting ended 40 minutes before it was supposed to. Damien had not expected to feel the way he felt when the preliminary numbers were presented. Not angry exactly, but something colder than anger, something that lived in the chest like a stone. The quarterly projections were 3 points below his personal benchmark, and while his CFO, Gerald Whitmore, had used words like market-adjusted and within acceptable variance with the careful calm of someone defusing a device, Damien had simply stood, closed his portfolio, and said 4 words. Reschedule the rest. No one argued. They never did. He rode the private elevator to his penthouse floor with his jaw set and his phone in his hand, scrolling through numbers that told him everything and nothing simultaneously. The elevator doors opened into his private entrance hall, and he stepped through without looking up, already moving toward his office, already composing in his mind the email he would send to Gerald, the expectations he would reset, the clarity he would impose on a situation that had allowed itself to become, in his estimation, unacceptably soft. He heard it before he saw it. A small sound. A soft, tuneless humming, the kind that has no audience and no performance in it, just the pure, unself-conscious expression of a small person who is happy. It stopped him cold in the middle of his living room the way a physical obstacle would have stopped him, completely, immediately, with his whole body suddenly alert. He turned. Sitting on the floor beside his coffee table, His handcrafted, $17,000 Italian marble coffee table was the smallest child he had ever seen in his home, which was to say, any child at all. She was sitting cross-legged on his carpet with what appeared to be a small, battered stuffed rabbit in her lap, looking up at him with enormous brown eyes that held absolutely no fear whatsoever. They stared at each other. Damian Mercer, who could silence a boardroom of 40 executives with a single look, who had faced down regulatory committees and hostile acquisition attempts and the particular specific terror of watching your entire company nearly collapse at age 26, he stood completely still in his own living room, staring at a toddler, and felt the faintest, strangest sensation move through him like a current. The child tilted her head. She had curly dark hair escaping from 2 uneven pigtails, and she was wearing overalls with a small embroidered strawberry on the bib. She looked at him with the patient, evaluating expression of someone deciding whether he was worth her attention. Then she held up the rabbit. "Bun Bun," she said, by way of introduction. As if this explained everything. As if this was sufficient. Damian opened his mouth. Closed it. He was, in this moment, a man who had genuinely forgotten how to operate. From down the hallway came the sound of running footsteps, and then Sofia Reyes appeared in the doorway of his living room, and the color drained from her face so completely and so rapidly that it was almost physiological to watch. She was 28, with dark eyes wide with the particular horror of someone watching an inevitable catastrophe unfold in slow motion. She was still holding a cleaning cloth. Her other hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God," she breathed. "Oh my God, sir, I am so sorry. I tried. She was supposed to stay. Lily, come here. Come to Mama right now." "Mama busy," Lily announced, without moving. "Lily." Sophia's voice had dropped to a desperate whisper. She crossed the room in 3 quick strides and scooped her daughter up, holding her against her hip with the firm, practiced grip of a woman who has carried this particular small person through approximately 1 million situations that required both hands and her full attention. "I'm so sorry," she said again, turning to face Damian. "I know this is completely unacceptable. I know. My childcare fell through, and I didn't have anyone, and I could miss the job, and she was being so quiet. I really thought, I'll call the agency, I'll explain, please don't. This won't affect your billing, and I'll—"
She stopped.
She was rambling. She knew she was rambling, and she made herself stop. She stood straight, adjusted her daughter on her hip, and met his eyes with all the dignity she could gather, which was more than he might have expected from someone who looked, in this moment, like they were bracing for impact. Damian looked at her. Then he looked at the child, who had twisted in her mother's arms to look back at him over her shoulder with those calm, dark, unafraid eyes. He should send them out. He knew that was what came next. He would say something measured and final. The agency would be informed. The situation would be resolved with the clean efficiency he applied to all disruptions. This was not a complicated equation. He opened his mouth. "What is the rabbit's name?" he heard himself say. The silence that followed was the kind that happens after something unexpected, when the air itself seems to need a moment to adjust. Sophia stared at him. Lily, delighted, answered immediately and with great seriousness. "Bun Bun Mercer." She very important. Something happened then in the landscape of Damian Mercer's face. It was small and quick, and he shut it down almost instantly, the way you might close a window against rain. But Sophia saw it. In the fraction of a second before his expression reassembled itself into its customary composure, something moved across it that she had not expected to see on a face like his. It looked almost exactly like longing. "Sit," he said, quietly to Sophia. And then, as if remembering he was speaking to another adult, "Please. I need coffee, and I clearly have time this morning. You can, she can, just keep her away from the shelves near the window." Sophia did not move for a full 3 seconds, certain she had misheard. "Sir?" "Coffee," he said again, already turning toward his kitchen. "Black. And there might be something in the pantry, crackers or whatever, for the—" He paused. "For Bun Bun's owner." Lily giggled. It was a sound Damien Mercer's penthouse had never heard before, high and bright and entirely unguarded, and it bounced off the high white ceilings and the glass walls and the careful, expensive silence of that space like a small, warm stone thrown into still water. The ripples, though neither of them knew it yet, would reach everywhere. By 9:15 in the morning, Lily Reyes had conducted a thorough investigation of approximately 40% of Damien Mercer's penthouse and found it both impressive and lacking. Impressive because of the windows, which went all the way to the floor and showed the whole city below like a picture in a book, and because of the big gray couch that was softer than it looked, and because of the tall plant in the corner with wide, shiny leaves that she was not supposed to touch but touched anyway when no one was looking, just to see. Lacking because there were no colors, no drawings on any walls, no photographs of people smiling, no small things on the low tables that existed for no reason, except that someone had loved them. Lily had been to lots of different homes. She went with her mama sometimes on jobs, on days like today, emergency days, and she had learned that you could tell a lot about a person from the small things they kept. Her own home had drawings she had made taped to the refrigerator. It had a photograph of her daddy that her mama kept on the shelf by the window, the one where he was laughing with his head thrown back, the one that made Mama's eyes go soft and far away when she looked at it too long. This man's home had none of that. And Lily, who did not yet have the social conditioning that would have prevented her from acknowledging this directly, felt it the way children feel things, not as an abstract observation, but as a fact about the texture of a place, the way it pressed against her skin. She carried Bun Bun to where Damien was sitting at the kitchen island with his coffee and his phone, and she climbed onto the stool beside him with the total physical confidence of a 3-year-old who has never once considered that she might not be welcome. Sophia, who was working in the kitchen, made a small panic sound. "Lily, honey." "She's fine," Damien said. He said it in his usual tone, flat and absent, but he did not move away from the child now perched beside him, and he did not return his full attention to his phone. Lily set Bun Bun on the counter and looked at his phone screen, which was full of numbers and words she could not read. She looked at his coffee, which was dark and smelled bitter and grown-up. She looked at his face, which was the kind of face that didn't smile easily, the kind she had seen on some of the men who came to her mama's building on the 1st of the month, carrying the weight of things. "You sad?" she asked. Sophia dropped her sponge. Damien looked at the child. "No," he said. Lily looked at him with the deeply skeptical expression of someone who has been told Santa is real, processed that information carefully, and decided to reserve judgment. "Your face looks sad," she said, very gently, not as an accusation but as a simple offering of data. "My face always looks like this," he said. She considered this. "Oh," she said, with enormous compassion. "That very hard." Sophia had her hand over her mouth. She was trying, with every fiber of her professional dignity, not to laugh and also not to cry, and she was not entirely succeeding at either. Damien put his phone down. He turned on his stool to look at the child properly, for the first time, in the full-on, deliberate way he usually reserved for people in negotiations, when he was trying to understand something, when he was actually paying attention. Lily looked back at him with the same unreserved openness, holding Bun Bun in both arms. "What's your name?" he asked. "Lily Sophia Reyes," she said, with great formality. "Named for my mama. And my daddy Marco. But my daddy is in the sky now." She looked up at the ceiling as she said it, then back at him. "You know someone in the sky?" The kitchen went very quiet. Damien's hands, which had been resting on the counter, went still. Sophia had stopped moving entirely. Something had changed in the quality of the air between them, had gone from the light, almost bearable awkwardness of an unusual morning to something much more tender, much more fragile. He had been 26 when his own father died. He had been alone in a hospital room in Boston, in a chair beside a bed, holding a hand that had already gone cold, in the middle of a night that he had not spoken about to anyone, not once, in the 7 years since. "Yes," he said, very quietly. "I do." Lily nodded, solemnly, with the gravity of one who fully understands. Then she held Bun Bun out to him with both hands. "You can hold her," she said. "She help." Damien Mercer, for the first time in 7 years, felt the precise and terrible sensation of tears pressing against the backs of his eyes. He reached out and took the small, worn rabbit from the child's outstretched hands. He held it carefully, the way you hold something that belongs to someone else, something precious and irreplaceable. "Thank you," he said. His voice was not quite steady. "You welcome," Lily said. Then she reached out and patted his hand, the way very small children pat, flat-palmed, certain, unhurried, and said, "It's okay. My mama say love don't go away. Just go different place." Sophia turned away to face the sink, pressing the backs of her fingers against her mouth. Her shoulders were shaking slightly. She had said those exact words to her daughter in the dark of a night 6 months ago, when Lily had asked why she couldn't have a daddy like other kids, and hearing them now, spoken back in her daughter's small, serious voice in this cold and beautiful kitchen, felt like something physically located in her chest. Damien looked down at the rabbit in his hands. Then he looked at this child beside him, this small, complete, utterly unafraid person who had walked into his careful, defended world and begun moving through it as though it had been made for her, as though walls and silences and reputations were simply not relevant information. For the first time in a very long time, Damien Mercer did not know what to say. And for the first time in a very long time, that felt not like a failure of control but like something else entirely. Like the beginning of something. By 10:30, there were crayons on his kitchen table. Damien was not sure exactly how this had happened. He had a vague recollection of Lily announcing that she needed to draw a picture, of Sophia producing a battered coloring book and a Ziploc bag of crayons from the bottomless depths of her tote bag with the resigned confidence of someone who has learned to carry a toddler's entire civilization on her person at all times. He had a less clear recollection of moving from the kitchen island to the table, of sitting down, of Lily patting the chair beside her and saying, "Sit here. You help." He had a very clear recollection of the moment he had sat down because it was the moment he realized he could not remember the last time he had sat at a table without a purpose, without a meeting or a meal or a document. Just sat. Lily pushed a crayon toward him. It was red. "Draw something," she instructed. I'm not good at drawing," he said. "That okay," she said, with the total acceptance of someone for whom this is genuinely irrelevant information. "Draw anyway." Sophia was working in the next room. He could hear her, the quiet sounds of someone cleaning with skill and intention, the faint swish of a cloth, the careful footsteps. She had tried twice to retrieve Lily, and Lily had not gone, and Damien had each time said, with increasing sincerity, that it was fine. He found he meant it more each time. He picked up the red crayon. He drew something that was meant to be a house. It looked more like a box with a triangle balanced on top of it, the kind of drawing a child might make, which was appropriate because the last time he had drawn anything he had been a child, sitting beside his father on a Sunday afternoon at a kitchen table in a house in Connecticut that no longer belonged to anyone in his family. "That a house?" Lily asked, studying it with professional seriousness. "Attempt," he said. "Need flowers," she said, and handed him a yellow crayon. He drew flowers. They looked nothing like flowers. Lily drew some beside his, and hers were extraordinary, full of confident circular petals and crooked stems, every line placed with the total commitment of someone uncontaminated by the fear of doing it wrong. He watched her draw and felt something loosen in his chest, some screw that had been turned too tight for too long, releasing just slightly. Sophia appeared in the kitchen doorway, and she stopped. He looked up. She was looking at the table, at the crayons scattered across the marble, at the coloring book, at her daughter pressed close against the side of a man she had been afraid to look at directly 2 hours ago, and at the man himself, sitting with his jacket off and his sleeves pushed up, a yellow crayon in his hand, looking up at her with an expression she couldn't immediately categorize. She had expected, at some point in this morning, to be fired. She had spent the last 2 hours cleaning the most expensive home she had ever entered while simultaneously bracing for the professional devastation she had been certain was coming. Instead, she had watched her daughter dismantle the most intimidating man she had ever encountered with the patient efficiency of a small person who simply did not accept that barriers existed. "I can take her," she said. "If you need to work." Sophia. He said her name. It was the first time he had used it, and the sound of it in his voice, calm, direct, like he had been saying it for a long time, made her blink. "Sit down. I still have the guest bathroom and the—" "It'll keep," he said. "Please." She sat down. Lily immediately handed her a blue crayon and pointed to a section of the coloring book. "You do the sky, Mama," she said. "Mr. Man do the house. I do the people." "Mr. Man?" Sophia said, looking at Damien. Something that was almost a smile moved across his face. "Almost." "I told her Damien is hard to say," he said. Sophia laughed, briefly, surprised out of herself, before she could think about whether it was appropriate. It was warm and unguarded, and it changed her face the way sunlight changes a room. Damien noticed this in a way he couldn't immediately categorize and chose, for now, not to. They colored. The three of them, in his 17,000-square-foot penthouse, at his kitchen table, with a bag of supermarket crayons and a $4 coloring book. Lily narrated as she went, providing extensive biographical information about the family she was drawing. Mama, Daddy in the sky who could still see them, Bun Bun who was a doctor, and a new person she described as the man who don't smile yet but learning. Neither adult spoke for a long moment. Yet, Damien said finally. "That's what she said," Sophia confirmed, not looking up from the sky she was coloring, carefully, in 3 different shades of blue. "She's very—" he searched for the word. "Perceptive," Sophia said, with equal measures of pride and apology. "I was going to say certain," he said. "About everything. She's not afraid of anything." Sophia's hands slowed on the page. She looked at her daughter, who was drawing the man who was learning to smile with an orange crayon, giving him a large smile regardless of current attainment, drawing the world as she felt it should be rather than as she found it. "She had a hard beginning," Sophia said quietly. "She lost her father before she even knew him. But she's never," she paused, finding the words. "She's never decided that the world is a place you have to protect yourself from. I don't know where that came from. Not from me. I protect myself from everything." Damien turned to look at her then, really look at her, with the same full attention he had turned on Lily earlier. She felt it and kept her eyes on the page, on the careful blue sky, on the crayon moving in her hand. "That's not weakness," he said. "I know," she said. "But it isn't what she has either. What she has is better." He looked at Lily, at the picture she was drawing with perfect, fearless confidence, at the smile she had already given the man who was still working on his own. "Yes," he said. "It is." It was 11:40 when Sophia said she needed to finish the guest bathroom, and Lily had finally surrendered to the deep, irresistible pull of mid-morning sleep, curling on the soft gray couch with bun tucked under her chin and her small chest rising and falling in the easy rhythm of a child completely at peace, entirely untroubled by the fact that she was sleeping in a stranger's penthouse 40 stories above Manhattan. Damien had covered her with a throw blanket from the chair without being asked. Sophia had watched him do it from across the room. Watched the care with which he tucked it around the child's shoulders, the slight hesitation of someone doing something for the first time, learning the geometry of tenderness from scratch. She finished the bathroom and came back to find him in his living room, standing at the window, looking out at the city with his hands behind his back and his shoulders carrying the specific weight of someone in the middle of thinking something through. She should have gathered Lily and the cleaning caddy and gone. The job was done, or close enough that leaving could be justified. She had already taken more from this man's morning than she had any right to. She crossed the room and stood beside him at the window, at a respectful distance, and looked out at the city too.
"Thank you," she said.
For this morning.
"For being," she paused.
For being so kind to her.
"She made it easy," he said.
"She makes everything easy," Sophia agreed. "She's the only person I know who operates entirely without an agenda." "I noticed," he said, and there was something in his voice that was not quite humor but was adjacent to it. They were quiet for a moment. Below them, the city moved in its constant, indifferent way. "Can I ask you something?" she said. He glanced at her. He didn't say yes, but he didn't say no, and she read that as permission because she had learned, in a life that had required her to become perceptive out of sheer survival necessity, how to read what people meant beneath what they said. "The person you know in the sky," she said. "Lily asked you about." He was quiet for a long time. Long enough that she thought he wouldn't answer, and she began to formulate the quiet apology she would offer for having asked. "My father," he said. "I'm sorry." 7 years, he said. It was the same thing people always said about time, about how it changed things, but he said it differently, not as comfort but as fact, as the measurement of a distance he was still somehow trying to cross. He was sick. Heart attack. Very fast. He paused. I was 26. There was a lot left unfinished between us. He was hard on me. He wanted me to be something specific, and I was trying to become that thing so fast, so completely, that he stopped. Started again. I thought there was more time to get it right. Sophia said nothing. She had learned that some grief, when it finally starts speaking, needs the space of silence around it. I built the company, he said.
After.
I took everything he left. It was almost nothing, really a shell of something, and I built it. I told myself it was for him, that I was finishing what he started. But somewhere in the building of it, he exhaled. I stopped. Stopped what? She asked softly. He turned from the window and looked at the room, the beautiful, empty room, with its precise art and its intentional negative space and its total, careful silence. He looked at the couch where Lily was sleeping, one small foot hanging off the edge, bun clutched to her chest. Everything else, he said. I stopped everything else. Sophia looked at him. Really looked, the way she had been careful not to all morning, keeping her eyes professional and averted in the way she always did in these spaces, these expensive places that weren't hers. She looked at him now and saw something she hadn't expected. Not the man from the photographs, the stormy-eyed billionaire who silenced rooms. A 33-year-old man standing in an enormous empty space he had built entirely around the shape of his own loneliness, not fully realizing that was what he'd done. Marco, my husband, she said. He was 29. There was a morning I kissed him goodbye and told him I'd see him at dinner, and I was annoyed with him about something small, something completely stupid. Her voice caught. She steadied it. I don't even fully remember what anymore. And then I never saw him again. Damien turned to look at her. I was angry for so long, she said. At the job site, at the safety company, at God, at Tuesdays, at everything. And then Lily started to grow inside me, and I realized I had a choice. I could stay in the place where the thing happened, or I could be in the place where she was going to be. She looked at her daughter on the couch. It's not that the grief went away. It didn't. It just went to a different place, he said. She looked at him.
She told you that.
She told me that, he confirmed. Sophia smiled, a real smile, full and complicated and full of everything the morning had been. She understands things, she said. She always has. From the very beginning she shook her head. She came into the world understanding it was good. I can't explain where that came from. I hope I never stop being surprised by it. Damien looked at the child on his couch for a long, quiet moment. She walked in here today, he said, and she looked at me like I was something worth looking at. He said it simply, without self-pity, just as an observation about something that had happened to him that morning that he was still in the process of understanding. I can't remember the last time anyone looked at me like that. She looks at everyone like that, Sophia said gently. She decides, I think, before she even knows someone, she decides they're worth it. And then she shrugged. She loves them. Just like that. Does it ever turn out to be wrong? He asked. Her judgment. Sophia considered this with genuine seriousness.
Not yet, she said.
He looked at the child. Then he looked at Sophia. Then he looked back out at the city, and something in his posture had changed. Some iron thing had gone out of his shoulders. Some careful architecture of defense had shifted, invisibly, incrementally, like a building settling after a long time of holding itself rigid against weather.
Her father, he said.
He would have been proud of her. Sophia's breath caught. And of you, he added quietly. She didn't speak for a moment. The city moved below them, indifferent and enormous. Lily slept on the couch, dreaming whatever it is that 3-year-olds dream, probably something with good colors and bun and enough sky. Thank you, Sophia said. Her voice was very soft. That's the kindest thing anyone has said to me in a very long time. Section 6. What home actually looks like. 3 weeks later, on a Saturday morning in early April, Damien Mercer stood in the toy aisle of a store on Fifth Avenue and accepted, with the equanimity of a man who has lately been learning to accept a great many things, that he had absolutely no idea what he was doing. He had the dimensions of the space he was trying to fill, not in square footage, which he could have calculated in seconds, but in terms of the person. He was trying to buy something for a child who made a cardboard box into an adventure and found wonder in a rain puddle and had, over the course of one impossible Wednesday morning, done something to him that he was still, weeks later, trying to find the right word for. Cracked something open. That was closest. He had called the agency the morning after to arrange for Sophia to join his regular cleaning rotation. He had told himself this was practical, she was efficient, thorough, professional, the work was genuinely excellent. He had told himself this for approximately 48 hours before acknowledging, in the honest interior where he could not deceive himself, that it had nothing to do with efficiency. She had come back on that Friday, and Lily had come too, legitimately this time, with Damien's specific and apparently confusing request that she be welcome, and Lily had walked in and gone directly to the kitchen table and said, "Crayons?" And Damien had opened the drawer where he had, in the intervening 2 days, placed a brand new box of 64 Crayolas. And Lily had gone quiet with a reverence that suggested he had given her something extraordinary. He had stood in his kitchen watching her face and felt something he had not felt in so long it took him a moment to identify. Happy. He had felt happy. The Saturdays came out of a conversation that had grown organically across 2 more cleaning days in the unplanned, unhurried way that real things grow, not strategically, not efficiently, but in the crooked, imprecise way of living things. Sophia had mentioned, without self-pity, that Saturdays were the hardest, because Lily's preschool was closed and the days were long and the apartment in Queens was small. She had mentioned it the way she mentioned most difficult things, factually, and with the implicit understanding that this was just the topography of her life, not a request for rescue. He had said, "Bring her here." She had looked at him. "On Saturdays," he said. "If you want to. The building has a rooftop garden that no one uses. She would probably like it." "Mr. Mercer?" "Damien," he said. He'd been saying this for 3 weeks, and she kept forgetting, or choosing not to remember. "Damien," she said, testing the shape of it, clearly uncomfortable. "I can't, this isn't, you don't have to do this." "I know I don't have to," he said. "I'd like to." She had looked at him for a long moment with those careful, assessing eyes, the eyes of a woman who has learned to read situations accurately because the cost of reading them wrong is too high. She was looking for the angle he knew, the thing underneath the offer. She had spent 4 years in other people's beautiful spaces, being invisible by design, learning very precisely where she stood. He understood that. He had spent 7 years in a self-constructed fortress of control and efficiency, also invisible in his own way, invisible to himself. "Just Saturdays," she said finally. "And Lily has to be home by 3 for her nap." "Understood," he said. Now, 3 Saturdays in, he stood in the toy aisle on Fifth Avenue because Lily had mentioned, with the casual informality of someone who has forgotten to maintain appropriate social distance, that Bun Bun would like a doctor kit, because how could Bun Bun be a doctor without a proper stethoscope? He bought the doctor kit. He also bought a set of finger paints he spotted on an adjacent shelf, because the rooftop garden had a table that was currently serving no purpose, and the visual of Lily with paint-covered hands discovering what happens when yellow meets blue felt, to him, like something worth facilitating. He also, after a moment's consideration, bought a second Bun Bun. For emergencies. Sophia was on the rooftop when he arrived, sitting on a bench with her face turned up toward the April sun, eyes closed. Lily was investigating a planter with the focused attention of a scientist. She was wearing a jacket with small yellow ducks on it and rain boots despite there being no rain, because she had decided that morning that it was a rain boot day, and Sophia had learned years ago which battles were worth having. Lily spotted him first. She abandoned the planter and ran toward him across the rooftop terrace, with her arms out in the unguarded, full commitment way that small children run, without reservation, without the calculation of whether the arrival will be welcome. He caught her, lifted her up. She was lighter than he expected, and also somehow exactly as solid as she should have been. This small certain person who had walked into his empty life 3 weeks ago and begun furnishing it with crayons and questions and the absolute conviction that he was worth sitting next to. "You bring something?" she demanded, spotting the bags. "Lily," Sophia said, from the bench, laughing. "Dr. Kit," he said. "For Bun Bun." Lily looked at him with an expression of such profound satisfaction that it was almost solemn. "Good," she said, with the authority of someone whose prescriptions have been filled. "She need it very bad." He set her down, and she took the bag and immediately sat down on the rooftop and began opening it with tremendous focused purpose. He walked to the bench and sat beside Sophia, leaving appropriate, careful space between them. She was looking at him with an expression that had become familiar over 3 weeks, warm, complicated, still faintly surprised. "She talked about coming here all morning," Sophia said. "She woke me up at 6 telling me she needed to brush her hair for the rooftop." "She brushed her hair herself?" "She informed me it was brushed," Sophia said. "I'll let you look at the back of her head and assess." He laughed. It came out rusty, a sound that needed more practice, but it came out, and Sophia turned at the sound of it with an expression that he didn't look at directly, but felt like sunlight against the side of his face. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "You can ask me anything," she said, and meant it. He could hear that she meant it.
What do you want? He said.
Not for Lily. Not from this. For yourself. What did you, before everything happened, what did you want? She was quiet for a moment. Below them, the city moved. On the rooftop, Lily had successfully opened the doctor kit and was administering a thorough checkup to Bun Bun, narrating the procedure in grave medical tones. I wanted to teach, Sophia said. Elementary school. I was 2 semesters from finishing my degree when Marco died.
She paused.
There wasn't time after. Money, school, work. The math didn't add up. Could it add up now? He said. She looked at him. Damien. I'm not offering to, he stopped. Reconsidered. Actually, I am offering to, but not. He ran a hand through his hair in a gesture that was entirely uncharacteristic, the gesture of a man who is choosing words with unusual care because he knows they matter. Not as charity. Not as whatever you're already thinking it is. Because a child who grows up with a mother who got to become what she was meant to be, he looked at Lily. That's the best thing I could give her. Sophia's hands were folded in her lap. She looked at them for a long moment. You're very strange, she said softly. For someone everyone says is terrifying. I was terrifying, he said. I think I might be in the process of becoming something else. She looked up at him, and this time neither of them looked away. Damien, Lily called imperiously from across the rooftop.
Come.
Bun Bun needs second opinion. Sophia laughed, full and real, and Damien smiled. Actually smiled, fully unhidden. The smile of someone who has just discovered, at 33, that a life can turn in a single ordinary morning, that walls come down not with force, but with a toddler's unhesitating certainty that they were never necessary in the first place. He stood up. He crossed the rooftop to where Lily was waiting with her doctor kit and her patient and her absolute confidence that he would come. He knelt down beside her. What's the verdict? He asked. She be okay? Lily said, with great seriousness, placing her plastic stethoscope on Bun Bun's chest. She just needs someone who love her. She looked up at him with those dark, certain eyes. Like everybody. He looked at Sophia, who was watching from the bench with the expression of a woman who is beginning, carefully and with good reason, to hope. He looked at Lily, who had already moved on to checking Bun Bun's blood pressure, certain that everything would be fine because she had decided it would be. He looked out at the city, spread below them like a possibility. Like everybody, he thought. And for the first time in 7 years, in a rooftop garden in April with crayon stains on his kitchen table and a second stuffed rabbit in his coat pocket, Damien Mercer understood that this was not the end of something. It was not a loss he was still measuring. It was not an empire he had built around an absence. It was a morning. It was a beginning. It was finally home.